Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the book of Galatians, and we're in chapter 1, and we're going to begin with verse 6. This is perhaps the earliest letter Paul has written. Doesn't really fit the mold of all the other letters he will write. He has a hello with grace and peace, as he does in verses 1 through 5. But in all of his other letters, after the hello and then grace and peace, these letters to the congregation, there comes a section in which he tells them how thankful he is for them and how much he's praying for them. And that can last the whole rest of the chapter, many verses. But he dispenses with that in this letter, or at least he hasn't developed that yet as part of his letter, because as soon as he says hello, he says in verse 6, and I'll be reading through verse 10, I am amazed that you are so quickly deserting him who called you by the grace of Christ for a different gospel, which is not another, only there are some who are disturbing you and want to distort the gospel of Christ. But even though we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to that which we have preached to you, let him be accursed. As we have said before, so say I now again, if any man is preaching to you a gospel contrary to that which you received, let him be accursed. Am I now seeking the favor of men or of God? Or am I striving to please men? If I were still trying to please men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ. Paul is feeling very emotional, intense. His feelings are intense about what is happening to the Galatians. When we were together last time, and as we introduced the book of Galatians, we talked about those congregations in what is northeast Turkey, where the Galatian region, where he had established churches like Lystra and Derbe, where Timothy is from, and we all, and city in Antioch and some others, and he had just planted these churches, and they are being swayed away from the gospel. As we continue reading, we mentioned this in the introduction. As we continue reading, we've come to know that these are Judaizers who are trying to convince them, these Gentiles, that to be a true Christian, you have to also observe the Mosaic law. And he is so upset about that, and he has good reason to. The primary reason he has to be upset about is that this is not the gospel, not the good news that was preached to them. And he is going to continually come back to this. We portrayed Jesus as crucified in front of your faces. And is that not good enough for you anymore? That you think you need more? You think you need to do something different? And he begins in the strongest possible terms. I just don't get it. I am so surprised that you are so quickly deserting Jesus. That's what he accuses him of doing. You are quickly deserting Jesus. We gave you grace. That's good news. What they are giving you is not good news. It's a law. We're giving you grace. That's good news. And so he says twice, if we or an angel tell you something else is the gospel, let him be accursed. In fact, there is nothing else that's the good news. Only the truth about Jesus is good news. And then he says in verse 10, am I now seeking the favor of men or of God? What is this favor of men that he's talking about? Am I striving to please men? If I were still striving to please men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ. Who are these men he's talking about? Or who is this man he's talking about? He's going to later on identify a party that comes from James that troubled the congregation at Antioch with the very same kinds of teaching. He doesn't accuse James himself of spreading this teaching, but those who are associating themselves with James, James the brother of Jesus, James the very influential and well-known observant Jew in Antioch, very influential in the church, as an elder in the church there. He's the voice that has the last word in Acts 15. He's the one that Paul goes directly to in Acts 21 when he brings the offering of the saints. And he's the one who hatches the plan for Paul to go to the uh, to the temple where Paul gets arrested. And people who are associated with him are causing this trouble, which is not the same as saying he's the one causing this trouble. But those who have attached themselves to James are causing this trouble. We'll talk more about James and his influence when we get to the story that involves him and Peter and others, which we'll get to quite soon. But that's the main reason. But there are a couple of other reasons that we know to be true. One is, and he'll bring this out in the next couple of chapters, he knows what it is to try to enforce the law, because he was the persecutor of Christians in his attempts to try to enforce the law. He knows where that can lead. He knows how far down that path people can go. He knows how dangerous, how violent it is to walk that path, because he walked it himself, and Jesus pulled him back from that path. So that's the second reason. And there's a third reason. Jews are on the clock. Anyone who thinks they're going to keep the law of Moses is on the clock, because in AD 70, the Roman army is going to destroy the city of Jerusalem and end forever Mosaic Judaism. It does not exist. It will never again exist. God destroyed it with the iron fist of the Roman Empire, and that ended that conversation. Well, it ought to have. Anyway, so it is a dead end for them to try to pursue this manner of life. That's a third reason. He'll talk about the first two throughout the book, but the primary, the one that means the most, the one that means everything really, is this. This is not the gospel. What you're doing is not the gospel. In fact, it's the opposite of gospel. Jesus fulfilled law to get it out of the way so that we can live by grace. Why are you throwing grace away to go back? That's how he begins his letter. We'll pick up with verse 11 next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.